Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of season two of the Big Ten Watchdog News podcast, episode 19 overall. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Graham Dinas.
And I'm Taylor Seamer.
We've got some interesting stuff to talk about today. The Big Ten season is just getting into full swing now. We had like the preview in December with a couple games, but this is where the season is really starting, and you've got 2.5 months ahead of just grueling Big Ten action. It's going to be just painful, I'm sure, for everyone. But before we get into talking about the Big Ten, just want to refer everyone to the description of the video, to our links. You follow us on Twitter and on TikTok, definitely on Twitter. We're posting a lot on there. Also, brand new since the last time we filmed, the Big Ten Watchdog News blog is live. I believe me and Taylor have both written one piece. Wolverine Corner has his piece out. So that is a place where at least I'm going to be posting weekly. I think Taylor, you are too. So we've got some fun stuff planned for that. Absolutely, make sure to check that out. View the layout as there's just a couple of episodes left. Or as we're just starting the season, more stuff will be going on. And then if you're listening to us, whether it's on Apple, on Spotify, or on YouTube, if you have a preference for another platform, all of those links will be in the description as well. All right, let's kick it off. Let's talk about Illinois off the start. Obviously, the Terrence Shannon Jr. stuff is the big story that's going on in the Big Ten right now, in college basketball right now. That story's a week old now, but essentially Terrence Shannon Jr. Charged with rape, posted bail in Lawrence, Kansas, back in September. Taylor wrote an article about this, or summarized the report pretty well. That is on the website. Again, link in description there. I'm going to hand it off to Taylor to talk a little bit about what he wrote.
Yeah, so you can find the details pretty much of the incident like in any place that you could possibly stumble across on the internet. Everybody and their brothers kind of writing about that. So I kind of just wanted to focus on what maybe would change with the team dynamic. Um, and now that it's a little late because they've played a couple games since then, so we've kind of got an idea. But the questions that I had were, how was the offense going to run? Because generally what I thought, or when I watched Illini basketball, it was a lot of Terrence Shannon just drives down the middle of the lane, and then if they help, he just kicks it to some guy to hit a three, and if they don't help, he just shoots a layup. Which I've been actually pleasantly surprised that they've covered that aspect pretty well. They've got some guys that are stepping up to play some um, different roles than what they're used to. Like I know Gary A is getting a lot more minutes. Um, and he's kind of helping out. And the offensive side, the 3-point side, is not lacking either. I mean, they're making, I think, maybe a higher percentage than they were before at this point. And then the defensive question was, Terrence Shannon was clearly the biggest or the best defender on the team. He would get, like, if he was tipping passes, and I think he's only averaging 1 or 2 steals a game, but um, just the pressure that he put on the ball forced other problems within the defense if it didn't come up in the box score. And he was, I mean, he's the fastest guy on the floor too, so he's finishing off a lot of the fast breaks. Just because he's the first guy that can get on the floor, they just lob the ball up and he goes and dunks it. Um, I haven't noticed necessarily as big of a defensive step up from somebody, but it's still better than kind of what I was expecting, considering I thought going into it that he was kind of generally the team.
Perimeter on the defense, and I'll also say I wrote a very in-depth blog, 2,000 plus words about the Illini, and just I kind of gave a player-by-player breakdown of how everyone fits into their role, how the team has performed up to this point with and without Terrence Shannon, and then what lies ahead in their future. And we'll get into that more in the Big Ten Spotlight segment. But yeah, I just refer everyone to that article. The perimeter defense is the point where I'm curious to see, because I think that's where the loss of Terrence Shannon is going to be felt the most. You saw in the game against Northwestern, they switched looks on Boo Buie. Damas guarded him some. It was a lot of Ty Rogers. Justin Harmon played a little bit on him defensively. I'm curious to see a week from Thursday, they play Michigan State on the 11th, and Michigan State has those three really good guards in Walker, Hogard, and Akins. That's where I'm curious to see, is a Luke Goody going to have to guard a third guard? Are we going to have Coleman Hawkins guarding a guard? Because, he can do anything on the defensive end of the court. I'm curious to see what that game plan looks like. Offensively, like you said, the step back, I expected there to be a pretty large decrease on the offensive end. That is not, it's actually been an uptick in offense the past two games, averaging 100 points, scoring 104 against Fairleigh Dickinson and then 96 against Northwestern. You're in your article that Damascus playing some booty ball. And this was as soon as the announcement happened. This was before they played Fairleigh Dickinson or Northwestern. That's actually exactly what is happening. Damask, especially against against Northwestern, dominating that mid post area like he did at Southern Illinois for 4 years. And he went for a 33 ball. That made me very happy to see him perform like that.
Yeah, I think that was probably the easiest prediction I could have put into that article, just because of the ability of both of us to be familiar with Domask coming out of Carbondale.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I watched it for he was there 3 years or something. So
all four, yeah.
I watched him there for 4 years, and that's all he did because they didn't really have a true point guard, and he could just bully people who were smaller than him. So that was like the least surprising thing, but I'm glad to see that it's working in the Big Ten because the Valley guards and the Big Ten guards are much different. But if it works, it works.
And it's not like it's a new thing that's happened since Terrence Shannon's been out. I mean, that's kind of been his role the whole way, but it's just an increase in volume of that type of possession. Whereas if you have a Terrence Shannon Jr., he's going to be able to isolate. He's going to get his crossover three that he always does. He's getting to the rim more often. And so in a game where Marcus Damask isn't going to shoot 70% from the field on, crazy tough shots, I'm curious to see where it comes from. Ty Rogers obviously is become the true point guard of the team. He's stronger than Damask with less of a jumper, so he could do the same booty ball thing. But the real difference I don't want to say the difference, but in the Marquette game, for some of the Tennessee game, the games that we dropped, the difference between that and what we've seen without Terrence Shannon Jr. is this team's making threes. And it's as simple as that. Justin Harmon has been incredibly efficient off the bench from three. Coleman Hawkins is shooting probably 34% from three, and it probably is way higher the past couple games. Gary A is shooting a high percentage. Goody obviously is shooting nothing but threes. And so as long as the shots are falling, there's not going to be a problem without Terrence Shannon. The question is, whenever they're not falling, how are we getting to the rim, getting easy looks, maybe Dane Danger time?
Yeah, I think that one problem they could fall into is kind of, what was that, like 2016 or 18 maybe, Virginia, where all they did was shoot the ball and then they lost to a 16 seed first round because when the ball's going in, they look like the number one team in the country. When the ball's not going in, they don't really have anything else.
Yeah.
So I would be wary that they might fall into that trap at some point. You can't shoot the ball great forever, so there's going to be a week or two in the Big Ten come 3 weeks from now, the last week of January, first week of February, where you just hit a lull and you lose the teams you shouldn't. But if they can, stay out of that danger zone, I think they're doing just fine without him.
We've known too for 2-3 years now that is just going to be the Illinois way. You're going to have to rely on shots to fall. And Terrence Shannon Jr. is a guy that even if shots weren't falling, he can get you a bucket. I don't know. Illinois doesn't really have that guy outside of Dane Danger this season, and without Terrence Shannon. So
yeah, and Danger's getting limited minutes of late. Correct?
Yeah, I believe I want to say he played maybe 4 minutes against Northwestern. He didn't play at all in the second half. It's been decreased, but I mentioned in my piece, at any given game, the matchup could dictate that Dane Danger needs to play 24 minutes tonight, and that will be a very important time. It's going to be matchup dictated. It's going to have to do with foul trouble and Coleman Hawkins. There's going to be a situation in which Dane Danger needs to be the guy. So I hope he's not getting discouraged because he is very important to this team still, even, if he hasn't played a ton the past 2 weeks. Moving on, with still staying within Illinois, tonight, we're filming this on Friday. I don't know when we're going to post this. The game may have already happened. It may be happening like as we're posting it, against number one Purdue. That's going to be a huge, huge litmus test for this Illinois team. Going on the road in Mackey Arena without Terrence Shannon Jr. The line's set at 10.5, which is kind of steep considering pretty
How
widely
well Illinois has been
considered
playing recently.
the top two teams in the conference. Number 1 and number 9 in the country. I'm excited. I think they only played once last year, and it was in Mackey. And Coleman Hawkins, I felt like did a fairly decent job against Zach Edey, because that was at the point of the season where he was playing the 5. I'm going to check the box score on that game, but I'm excited to see the matchup. Lance Jones, obviously, is another piece that Illinois is going to have to contain. That's probably going to be the Ty Rogers job, but they've got a lot of good guards, and I'm curious to see how we match up with them. I'm curious to see how they match up with us. The reunion as well of Lance Jones and Marcus Damask. Over and under 2.5 mentions that they were teammates at SIU tonight.
Oh, over, I think.
Okay.
Who's on the call? Do we
I don't
know?
know. It's FS1, so I'm not really sure.
So not the regular guys.
Probably not.
I was gonna say, if it was like a guy like Robbie or somebody like that, we would have gotten like 6 of those mentions.
I don't know. I feel like Robbie has enough material to where he can avoid it. I feel like someone else is going to have to lean on the fact that they played together at Southern.
Do you think we get a mention that Painter was once at Southern as well?
Ooh. I don't know if it'll have anything to do with the game, but that will certainly be brought up. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? On just in general, like 10.5. Where do you think this game will end up going?
10.5, I think, is steep. But then I think the over under is low. It's only at 154.
Okay.
But it's like both of these teams could score 80 easily, and then you'd be over it already. I mean, I've seen both of these teams score 80 plus, I think, in like 95% of their games they played this year.
Yeah. And I mean, they're both, sound defensively, but
yeah, but I mean, I think offense beats defense usually in basketball. If you've got enough of it, you can beat a pretty good defense. I think that the guard play for Purdue is going to be a bit much for Illinois to handle. Unless Underwood has a strategy kind of looking back at what worked last year, and that was a lot of pressure on the guards, which they have the guys to do that. It would have been even easier with Shannon, but I mean, Domas can easily guard a guy at 3/4 court. So can Hawkins. I mean, they have the guys
Rogers
to
is the
guard.
guy, yeah. Especially
They have guys up front that can guard 3/4 court, and that was the problem. That was what gave Purdue problems last year. So I think it'll really come down to how many minutes can Danger keep Edey in check, because I don't know that Coleman did. I mean, we saw it last year, and
I'm checking the box score now. Edey, primarily with Coleman on him in that game, 17 points, 6 boards, 6 of 13 from the field. So by Zach Edey's standards, that's just horrific.
True.
That might be his worst game ever. And it's,
and he still put up
17. Yeah. What are you gonna do? Matt Meyer in that game, 5 of 14, 1 of 10 from 3. That's fun to read. 76-71 in Mackey last year. So this is the rematch. People are talking about it being the most important game of Brad Underwood's Illinois tenure. That's just not the case at all. But
no.
I understand why people are saying it, kind of. I mean, I don't know if he's played the number 1 team in the country, but regular season wise, that Michigan game a couple years ago was massive. Obviously, winning the Big Ten regular season, winning the Big Ten tournament, any tournament game, regardless of how poorly they've gone, is more important than this one. So yeah,
I'll refrain from comment there.
Yeah, let's segue into Purdue officially. We had the game in between, but Purdue, kind of by necessity, has just kind of steadied their way back into the number one spot. Since we last talked, I believe we were talking about the Alabama game. They won that one. That was not pretty at all. And then they win in Indianapolis against Arizona whenever they were the number one team in the country. So they vaulted Houston. And then, bless you, a couple, nobodies in there, and then a win at Maryland by 15. So they're the number one team in the country again. And they look at, according to my metric, they're the number one team overall. Lance Jones has been incredible for them as far as just like filling a role that they didn't have last year. And people are talking about how he's, the guy that's taking them up to another level, just with his speed, athleticism off the dribble. I don't know. We need to talk about Purdue, but nothing's really changed,
Yeah, I would agree with something I think you said earlier. They're kind of just the number one by necessity. I think no team has really looked like dominant in the year.
Houston's undefeated. Houston's undefeated, but they haven't played anyone yet. And
Right,
they
and this is
will.
the same story they do every year. They get a 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed in the tournament because they play really good defense according to the metric because they don't really play anybody, so they give up like 30 points a game. And they make it relatively deep because the defense is great, but they just can't get over that hump of like, Elite Eight.
That Big 12, the Big 12 schedule is going to help them a ton, or it might hurt them, because that's the deepest league in the country this year, and they're going to have 16 very important games out of their next 20. So
Right,
I'm
they have the
curious to see
opportunity.
how that transition goes. But as of now, they're the number two team in the country. So
They have every opportunity to do that. But I don't know. I think I like Purdue being at the one, even though it feels just wrong because I know how they always end up at the end of the year. But you can't rank based on what you think will happen. So
yeah, this team, people are saying this team's better than last year's team. I think they're roughly the same.
it's entirely last year's team, really, just with an extra year of experience.
That's
and not
exactly. I don't think this team is any better than last year's team. I think that this team, you can trust them more. Braden Smith has made a huge leap. As he's kind of, last year was Shaky, who was the second guy around Edey. This year it's Braden Smith, and he's averaging 6.7 assists a game as well. One of the best guards in the conference. And Zach Edey is probably doing better than he did last year. I mean, I don't know if anyone can possibly win National Player of the Year over him again.
Is he just tall, though? Do we need to get into this discussion?
Yeah, I don't think we've done this enough. If he was just tall, he would still be just tall. He's good. He is good.
He would be like Hunter Dickinson, just tall.
You think?
But he is better. Is that
Hunter
what
Dickinson? Hunter Dickinson is good as well, but the stat sheet inflates what he does. Like, he's second in the country in rebounding. I don't think there's anything to that. He just gets easy looks all the time.
Because he's tall.
And he's good, but he's not as good as Zach Edey. I think if Zach Edey was also 7'1" or 7'2", if he was 2 or 3 inches shorter, I still think he's probably better than Dickinson.
And what do you think of Rothstein's comparison to Yao Ming that he always posts after every Purdue game?
He's the Yao Ming of college basketball. I mean, if Yao Ming at the NBA level could have had a full career dealing without injuries, it would just be what Zach Edey is doing in college basketball. This is the closest that we're probably ever going to come to seeing a fully healthy Yao Ming ever again.
Do you think that I've seen some mock drafts that have Edey going as
lottery
pick though? So do you think he's that good and that his game translates to the NBA?
I think this is true for a lot of big guys. The Kofi Coburns and Oscar Tshiebwe's and Jahlil Okafor's of the world. He was kind of the first. If you're going to build your system around Zach Edey, like Purdue has in the NBA, he would be wildly successful. But that's simply not the most efficient way to build your team anymore.
Well, it helps in Purdue as well because they just have 7-footer after 7-footer after 7-footer. So they've had like
Painter has a type,
15 years to build an offense around a 7-footer, and no NBA team is going to want to take 15 years to build around a 7-footer when one, he won't be in the league after 15 years, so you don't know, and so then you won't know when the next 15-footer is coming. And two, that's just not the offense that anyone in the NBA runs.
The college game is a completely different game than the NBA at this point. And if you're going to build around Zach Edey at the NBA level, Zach Edey can be successful. Your team will not be. You're going to get circles run around you defensively. And then offensively, you're going to be taking way too many twos. It's just, unless if he develops as a passer to be a Jokic type, which I don't foresee
Not quick enough,
happening.
I don't think, for that. Jokic can like dribble the ball up the court himself.
He's so
I mean, you saw
skilled.
he took the inbounds last night in that game and he hit the game-winning shot from at the opposing free throw line, dribbled up and then hit a 50-footer. I mean, Zach Edey can't do that.
You have to possess some sort of passing ability or skills with the ball in your hand away from the rim to be a legit back to the basket center in the NBA. And Zach Edey, I don't think possesses that level of ability. And I don't think, frankly, he will. I think he's a good piece to have situationally as a rotational piece, as a ninth or 10th guy off the bench. Because there will maybe be games where shots aren't falling and you say, screw it, let's put in the tall guy that's going to score at the rim.
So do you think the lottery outlook is overblown, and do you think he should
Yes.
be drafted at all?
I think same
Should
as
any
all.
team waste a pick on him
I
if
mean,
he
the
thinks he's
Luka
not worth it?
Garza, yeah, Kofi late second projection. He's better than those guys though. I don't want to say he's more dominant in his role. So I don't know. I say if you're a bad team and you want to take a flyer on him, go for it. If you're a good team and you want to take a flyer on him, go for it. But I wouldn't do it in the first round. I don't think he has that value personally.
I think he'll be a perennial G leaguer if somebody takes him. He should go
I
play in
can
Italy and he would be
I could
fine.
see him being a G League MVP or a strong European basketball player or somewhere in China or Taiwan or one of those leagues. He would dominate all of those leagues. He would. He's too good to play in that league, but he doesn't fit in the NBA scheme. It's a tough spot. It's hard to be tall in this. I guess tall and not skilled with guard skills in this era of the NBA. All right, let's talk about your guys. The Michigan Wolverines, losers of 8 of their last 11. The sky is falling, and I want to be 100% serious right now about the Juwan Howard situation. Is he actually like at risk of being fired in the next like 2 weeks?
Um, so the word that I have on this, on Good Word, is that he will not be fired before the end of the season due
Okay.
to this situation. Um, they may use it as pretext to fire him at the end of the year, in combination with how the season ends. Um, this might be an excuse that they could use to maybe get out of paying a buyout or something. But he will be the coach through the end of the year, barring another incident that would require him to be fired, is the word that I have on the situation.
I want you to break down the incident because I'm still not like fully aware of what happened. I just know of names and strength coach. I just
Yeah,
know the
so
very basics.
so the story that I have kind of pieced together from a couple different places is that, well, before the season, right before the season started, about a week before the first game that they played, the first exhibition game that they played, Chase Howard came back injured with a what they called at the time a stress fracture in his knee, which would be requiring, some physical therapy and whatnot to get back um, fully healthy so he could play. Um, Apparently, there was later on in the process a second opinion that they went to a different doctor, a second opinion, and they found out that it was something a little worse than that, that was going to require like some long-term, like actual rehab stuff that he was going to need to be doing. Um, and so he was apparently not doing that to the liking of the strength coach. He was like skipping rehab sessions, and the strength coach was getting on to him for that, some things like that. And so one day it kind of bubbled over into the fact that the strength coach was saying that this is the problem with the culture around here is that nobody wants to do anything to get right and get better and go play basketball at the highest level that you can. And I'm not sure if Juwan was around at that time or then Jace relayed that to Juwan and then they had a discussion that got heated. But somehow Juwan and the strength coach, I think his name is John Sanderson, maybe Joe Sanderson. Um, I think it's Joe. They somehow got into confrontation regarding the fact that the strength coach was telling Jace that there was problems in the program, who, of course, is the coach's son and was going to tell
Yeah.
his dad that people were talking bad about his program, which bubbled over into a at least a verbal altercation, but there is rumor that there was a physical component to it and that Sanderson filed a complaint with the university for it and took a leave of absence on his own. I'm not sure if he's back. I doubt it.
Yeah.
He's also the strength coach for the wrestling team, so maybe he's focusing entirely on
Right.
that, and they've got some assistant helping with the basketball team now. Not that it matters because they're absolutely atrocious. Um, but yeah, that is the story on that from what I've been told.
Okay, and once again, I want to refer people to our website, our new website, where Wolverine Corner did write, like it's almost a hit piece on Juwan Howard. Is just there's a timeline in there of wrongdoing. Um, I loved it as a known Juwan Howard hater. I was a fan of that article, huge fan. I want to talk basketball with Michigan. Did you go to the? No, you're here. Did you watch the game last night? And what is happening? Why did they start out so well with a win against a good St. John's team, and has just fallen off a cliff now at 6-8 or 6-7? I believe 6-8, right?
I want to say 8, but um, anyways, to your point, um, it's the state of the program is bad. They just, for some reason, don't want to play basketball. And I don't know why that is, because that's what they're
That's a
there.
problem,
What
is
they're
what
getting
that is.
paid to do is play basketball. Um, the Juwan drama off the court, I'm sure, is not helping, but that has nothing to do with the on the court issues. Um, they just nobody knows how to play within their role. Everybody wants to be like the guy. Like last year, Jet wanted to be the guy, and Hunter wanted to be the guy, and Kobe wanted to be the guy. And that has transitioned into Doug wants to be the guy, and Kamala wants to be the guy, and Terrace Reed wants to be the guy, and Terrence William wants to be the guy. And so there's just no cohesiveness within the team, which comes into play down the stretch when you need just one guy and for everybody to kind of coalesce around him and just make the play that's in front of you and not trying to make a play that isn't there. And that's kind of what they do down the stretch. That's why they lose all these close games. That I mean, they were up, I think 5 with 7 to go, or maybe it was 7 with 5 to go. I can't remember. And they lost the game last night. It's just insane. I was not home. One, two, it was not. I don't pay for Peacock just on principle. I think the Big Ten fumbled that bag when they decided that they were going to allow NBC to put those games on Peacock. And three, I'm on a watching on the television boycott until they prove me otherwise. And I would be on the watch live boycott as well, except I've already paid for the tickets.
Yeah,
So
fair.
I get to watch them struggle in person next semester,
Hmm.
which is going to be the best part of my life. What has changed from St. John's? Um, First of all, I think St. John's is not as good as people were hyping them up to be.
I think they're a
Um,
bubble team. I have them in my first four out. I think they're, I don't know, I don't
right,
want to
but
say overperforming.
at the time of that game being played, it was a winner of this game gets into the top 25.
Yeah, that was wrong on it on whoever, like, at
So
that time. Yeah.
Correct. So St. John's might be the 69th best team in the league, but not the 26th best team in the league. So I think there was a little bit of overhyping for that St. John's game. Michigan also just has something about playing in the Garden. They've I forget the stat now. It was out whenever they were playing that game, and they've won like their last like 8 games or something in the Garden over the last like I don't know 15 years or something. They've won the last 8 games that they've played there, and so that plays a little bit of part into it. Also, Juwan wasn't there at that time. It was a Martelli coach team, and they were playing much better under Martelli than Juwan, which is something that people have been talking about. Is they should just can Juwan and let Martelli coach the rest of the season and get an early jump on finding a guy for next year, because I mean the coaching carousel starts like the first week of February. Really, teams know who's going to be fired and who's not, and who's available to be talked out of their contract that they're currently at. So that is some rumblings. I could get. I'm not a fire the guy person generally. In the moment, I would say things, but when I come back to rationalize them, I don't really like it. But they were playing better under Phil, and so maybe that is part of it. I don't know, but all of it combined is just a bad product on the court.
The name that I've seen linked is Nate Oates, and I don't understand what the connection is there, and I'm not entirely certain that he would take the job even if it was offered to him, because he's got Alabama in a good spot right now. What's the connection to Nate Oates in Michigan?
I think it's just wishful thinking that he's
He's a Mac guy.
He's a coach who relies upon defense and people playing together and I can't really say no nonsense because of last year's off the court shenanigans, but on the court he puts up with no shenanigans. At least he doesn't have any room for error on the court. But that being said, as we've seen with the Illinois situation, every team has things in their closet that they know of that they don't really do anything about until it becomes a big story. So you can't really, I mean, it's wrong, but you can't really fault him because everybody's doing it. So I don't think there's like a genuine connection. I think it's just wishful thinking that he's known to turn programs around like he did in Alabama. And I mean, Michigan is a big time brand, has plenty of success in the past, can get recruits clearly. I mean, look at the last how many years?
Yeah.
So
3 or 4 years at Bama for
I
sure.
think it's mostly wishful thinking, but yeah.
I was gonna ask who you would want, but we're 3 months of a season left for you to come up with people who are going to end up getting fired at the end of this year and what type of assistants are going to free up. And so there's a long road for that.
This is kind of the same situation. There's kind of two situations the university can take in this place. They can just fire him outright,
eat the
and
contract,
just start all over again and be bad for the next 3 years until something turns around. Or they can give him the Jim Harbaugh treatment, which is you fire all of your assistants and make changes, and if it works, you keep your job, and if it doesn't, you don't. Which worked for him, as you can see, I mean, really for the game on Monday, which is a risk because you either risk another year of Juwan losing, or he turns it around completely, like Jim did, or 3, they just stick with him for 1 more year and they claim like, oh, he wasn't there in the beginning of the year because of his heart problems and all this stuff. So that wasn't really his team. So we'll give him 1 more year. Those are the 3 options, and I'm not sure that I really like any of the 3.
Yeah, no, it's a tough spot to be in, but I'm sure you would trade it for a win on Monday. You'd trade how many years of painful to watch Michigan basketball would you trade for 1 national championship this year?
I would say like,
because you're a basketball guy first.
I am a basketball guy first, 100%. But I would say precisely 7 years plus the non-con of the 8th year.
Okay, so yeah, 7 and
so like 7.5 years.
7.4. Yeah.
Bad basketball.
Okay, I respect
for
that
a win
number.
on Monday.
Okay, for 1 win against known Michigan killer Michael Penix Jr., who did beat them in 2020 with Indiana.
That was with Don Brown still on the defensive staff. That was before Jim Harbaugh's entire assistant realignment.
Yeah, so they haven't even prepped for him yet. They don't know. Okay, and the last team I want to talk about before we get to my rankings is the Wisconsin Badgers. The way I see it in the Big Ten, Purdue is the best team in the country, and so they're alone in Tier 1. You agree with me on that?
I would agree, yes.
And then Tier 2 is Illinois and Wisconsin. That's kind of what I believe is the perception. That's what I have personally.
I think so, and I think you might be able to throw Michigan State in there another week.
I think Michigan State's good enough to be there, but the resume doesn't speak for itself yet, and I think
Sure.
it will. We'll talk about that later. Wisconsin is really good, and they've made a tremendous strides. Last year, what was a disappointing year. This year, I think the big difference is the addition of AJ Storr, and that's not groundbreaking by any means, but this is a guy who's now their leading scorer, transfer from St. John's, averaging 15 points a game, starting and getting essentially all of the Connor Esija minutes, which is kind of shocking, but he's been dealing with like injuries and stuff as well. So, but AJ Storr brings a different level of athlete to the Wisconsin program that I don't know if they've had in a really, really long time. Like Johnny Davis was good, but Johnny Davis didn't scare you athletically. AJ Storr adds another element to this Wisconsin team that's very sound with their guys, their Hepburn, Tyler Wall, Stephen Crowell, that group, Max Klesmit. Um, he's completely changed this team into a high-end Big Ten team that's going to compete and give Purdue a run for the conference, I think.
Did you see the off the backboard oop he threw the other day?
Yeah, I kept seeing him tweet. He would quote tweet every time he got posted with about four laughing emojis, and I didn't understand that. But AJ Storr was tweeting about the play. The play was crazy. I think I retweeted it. Um,
Yeah, that's like very
oh,
uncharacteristic for Wisconsin if you've watched them in any of their games in the past,
exactly.
century. Um, and I saw somebody comment somewhere, I think it might have been Ant, who was like, I want to know where Bo Ryan is right now and how how much he's squirming in whatever chair he's watching this game in, because he would never allow that flashiness on one of his teams. And I just think that's hilarious because he had good teams, but they were good, like sound, and they just did everything by the book.
As much as I love Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker, uh, they weren't doing anything that was nearly as exciting as what AJ Storr does. I love Frank. Do you think that this Wisconsin team I mean, I'm asking you to predict the next 2 months. Are they going to be a tier ahead of the rest of the field, or do you think they're going to settle in and be a tournament, a good enough Big Ten team that's going to go 12-8, 11-9 in Big Ten play? Or are they a step above and a team that'll be in the top three?
I think they definitely have the opportunity to be in the top three. I mean, they already have a win over Michigan State, so if a tiebreaker comes down to it at the end, they can take that. Um, However, the Big Ten is a gauntlet, and everybody has bad nights. I mean, even Purdue last year, they lost 5 games in the Big Ten.
Yeah, 5 games in
So, I mean,
conference.
and they were the number one team for how long and played well. So, and they won the Big Ten by 3 games and still had 5 losses. So,
Hmm.
um, the Big Ten itself is just so hard that I don't know that even if they do finish 11-9 or 12-8, it's not a bad look because they're athletically positioned well enough to do well in the tournament this year, unlike last year.
Yeah, and the year before, even whenever they won a share of the regular season title back in 2021, I still like I remember that first round game against Colgate. There was a 3-14. Colgate gave them a run for their money. They just don't challenge these lower level schools athletically, and then I believe Iowa State finished them off in the second round. So I think this Wisconsin team's better. I don't know if they'll be better than Michigan State, but I think at the minimum, it looks like they're the fourth best team in the conference. And I don't even know if that has much to do with how good they are. I think it's just an indictment on how
Mid.
rough this conference is going to look this year. And we'll get into it with the tournament rankings. But I had my template for how I do it on our prep sheet. and I was changing out the numbers because I've got the net ratings and the Ken Palm rankings and strength of record stats. And last year there were 11 teams that were consistently in the top 60 in all those, and this year we've got 7 of those. The whole bottom half of the conference is just looking to not be super competitive, and that's something that the Big Ten hasn't seen in years now. So it may be a rough look. We'll see.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Big Ten is just it's it's like in one of those weird rotations of you were the best league, and so that's what everybody kind of wanted you to be, and then everybody else is kind of just caught up, I think. Like I don't think I mean if you take like a Minnesota, a Rutgers, an Iowa, a Maryland, and you stick them in another conference, they probably finish in like the same position that they're in right now
Yeah. No. Yeah. The
in the
Big
Big
Ten
Ten.
is very average.
So
For
I think
yeah.
I think it's like the other places. I don't think the Big Ten has gotten worse. I think it's other conferences have gotten better, or they've kind of like strategized as to how to make their conference schedules put them in position to compete with the idea that the Big Ten is the best conference
Yeah.
in basketball.
Yeah. And we'll get into all this stuff. I've got the tournament rankings. Do you remember whenever we did this last year? Did I go from 14 to 1, or did I count? Did I go bet. I feel like I probably went best to worst, right? I think I did. I think okay, we'll do. I think we'll do it that way again. This is normally the time of the episode where we would do the Big Ten Spotlight segment, where I'd go a little more in depth on the team that I wrote about. But we already talked enough about Illinois, um, that I don't think we need to explain too much more about it. If you want to go super in depth, um, check the link in the description and read the piece that I wrote. It is very in depth, and I enjoyed writing it, and I look forward to doing that with the other 13 teams. I don't know if I'll be able to write 2,000 words for a Minnesota team, but I'll try my best. But it was easy to start off with Illinois as a team that I know the most about in the conference. Okay, so number 1 is Purdue, and we talked about them. I have them as my number 1 overall team in the country. They're second in the net, first in strength of record. I have on here 6th in Ken Palm. That's wrong. They're second in Ken Palm. That's what it is. They're third in the net. They're second in Ken Palm. We talked about them enough. They'd be playing a 16 seed. Hopefully they wouldn't get bounced this year in this scenario. So yeah, I've got them number 1. And then I have Wisconsin at number 2 over Illinois. I have Wisconsin currently as a 4 seed. And I just want to say that my metric, it's a new one this year compared to the one from last year. And it's less predictive, and I believe that it's more of a, if the season ended today, this is where you would be in the field right now. So Wisconsin being number 13 overall, they're 13th in Ken Palm, they're 13th in strength of record, and they're 14th in the net. We just talked about them. Illinois is number 3 in the conference. They're a 5 seed. I have them at 17 in the country, 7th in the net, 19th in strength of record, 8th in Ken Palm, blah, blah, blah. Ohio State is the first team that we haven't really talked about today. My metric has them at number 35 in the country, number 9 overall, 29 in Ken Palm, 31 in strength of record, 36th in the net. I feel like it's refreshing to have a good Ohio State team. Last year, it kind of felt weird not talking about Ohio State basketball as one of the tournament capable teams.
Yeah, and they don't really have anything that's like crazy different from last year. I mean, I think last year they might have even had better players. They had Sensabaugh, who was legit. I mean, went to the league. So I think it was just like a weird, like bad vibe, juju magic going on in Columbus last year for that team that just, I don't know, couldn't do anything.
Yeah, they dropped 9 in a row in conference play in a spell that was broken with a home win over Illinois. Um, yeah, no, I feel like Sensabaugh, we agree that he was good, but also we just kept talking about, I remember how the puzzle pieces didn't quite fit right together. And how his defense, like Sensabaugh was one of the best offensive players in the conference, but defensively, he was enough of a negative to where, should he even be out there? And in the NBA, it's not going to be as big of a deal, but I mean, he possesses the skill set. This year, Jamison Battle, the transfer, that's massive. He leads the conference in 3-point makes, and so that's a huge uptick.
Just
Just
think
grow.
if Jamison Battle had stayed on Minnesota, we could be talking about a tournament team Minnesota right now.
I don't think that's out of the question, and we'll talk about that as well. I think they're gonna need some help, but they're 2-1 in conference now. That's not out of the question. Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale in the backcourt, both making huge leaps as sophomores. Zed Key obviously sticking around. Ohio State's a tournament team. We knew they had a tournament roster last year. I'm glad that the pieces are fitting together now.
Yeah, barring a collapse, kind of like they did last year, where they lost, what'd you say, 9 in a row?
I believe they lost 6 in a row, won 1, and then lost 9 in a row.
Okay, yeah. So barring some sort of collapse like that midway through the conference schedule, I think they're pretty much set into the tournament.
Yeah. Another team I have is a 9 seed. They're just one spot below Ohio State in the metric. Is Big Red Nebraska ball coming in at number 5. They're 34th strength of record, 49 in Ken Palm, 58 in the net. They got the win against Michigan State, which was massive. They just
And then
beat
they beat
Indiana at
Indiana by
home.
20.
But yeah, it was 86-70. Tominaga, I believe, had 28 points. They're for real. And I was hoping that this would be the year where the Hoiberg vision would be realized and they would be a tournament team. And as of now, that's the case. That's just what's happening. I'm very
I still
happy
feel
about it.
like they look and like feel like they're still a team of misfits. Like they're at the orphanage playing like a pickup game. But yet somehow this year it's working, and last year and the year before it didn't. And I'm not sure why, but I enjoy watching the Nebraska basketball, which is a weird statement to say.
There were signs last year that it could work. And they went 9-11 in conference. Like they were 3 games back of second. Which is crazy. So last year we saw it work. They just needed to perform better in the non-conference and start out better in the Big Ten.
Which is what they did here. They started out 11 and
They've
2.
achieved, yeah, they've got the first leg of that. They just need to stay, if they can be a 500 Big Ten team, they're looking at least a bubble spot. And if they're better than that, then they're a lock, I think. So very
Maybe
exciting.
they get their first ever tournament win if they get in, though.
Oh,
They've never won a tournament game.
I think they can beat anyone, right? Bryce Williams is pretty good. Tominaga on
They
any
just need
given
Tominaga's
night.
parents to be in the stands. I think
Jawan
I was
Gary.
watching the game, the Indiana game, and they were like, his parents were there for that game, and they were like, with his parents in the stands, he averages like 28 points a night or something. They just need his
Hey,
parents to be there for this tournament game, and then they're going to win.
I don't see why you wouldn't do that. That seems like it's 100% causation over.
Hopefully,
It's
they
not.
get a game that's in like Washington or like San Francisco or something, and it's an
Yeah,
easy
West
trip.
Coast. I'm sure. Yeah, they could go
Don't
for
put them
that.
in Portland, Maine. Put them in Portland, Oregon, and we might see
Nebraska.
Nebraska win their first ever
They,
tournament.
they're a team that could make a Sweet 16 as like a 12 seed. Like I can see them being like a last 4 in, and then making the Sweet 16. Okay. And my metric as of now has those 5 teams as the only 5 that would make the field. And I haven't said Michigan State yet, and that's just because, like I said, what they have on paper right now would not get them in. I think they're going to go 12-8 in the Big Ten and be perfectly fine. But as of now, JMU lost, Nebraska lost, the Wisconsin loss at home. It doesn't look pretty yet, but what they've done recently will get them in. Ahead of them at number 6, though, is Northwestern, who's coming off a trouncing in Champaign. They're in my first four out. They're my fourth team out, just behind St. John's. They're number 54 overall in my ranking in the country. They're 80th in the net, but their strength of record is 54. Ken Palm has them at 66. So yeah, they're a fringe tournament team. I think that's reasonable for this Northwestern group.
If not for that Purdue win, they wouldn't even be discussed.
True, but also
Um,
if not for the Chicago State
if not for the
loss,
Chicago State loss, they
I
would
think
probably be in.
those two games just completely cancel each other out, and
Correct.
that leaves them as a first four out type team.
And with the way that they're playing right now, I see them falling further down. I mean, they have to play Michigan State coming up on Sunday. They play Wisconsin, Illinois again. They play Purdue. They play Ohio State. They've got to play, at Indiana, which isn't easy. They got to play at Rutgers. They play Michigan State again to close the schedule. So I think they might find themselves on the way out, even though last year into this year they looked like the program was on the up.
It's an endless cycle with Northwestern because as soon as you give them any sort of expectations, they're bound to just wildly underperform. But whenever you don't expect anything out of them, they have a year like last year where they come out and finish second in the conference and get a 7 seed and win a tournament game. But yeah, this year you expect them to not be maybe as good as last year, losing Chase Audige, but be reasonably close. And as of now, it's not looking super pretty. So we'll see.
I see
Yeah.
them sliding down to about the 9th or 10th spot in the conference.
I don't know if I can say that though, with how the bottom of the Big Ten looks. I definitely don't see them being any higher than sixth.
I think
But
they lose. Well, they're going to fall below Michigan State. I think they lose to Indiana and Minnesota. That already puts them at 9. Rutgers maybe 2 puts them at 10. I
we'll
think it's
see.
very possible.
I mean, anything with this Northwestern group, I feel like anything's possible. They could go both ways. And then Michigan State, they're in my next four out, number 57. Whenever I did it, my first edition of the rankings last week, they were not on the bubble. They're just blowout win over Penn State, even though Penn State, spoiler, is going to be number 14 on the list.
Who called that one, by the way?
Yeah, I'm disappointed in Penn State personally, but we'll get to them. Michigan State blowing them out gets them all the way up to number 57. They have a good win against Baylor recently too. They're turning their season around. 23rd in the net, 17th in Ken Palm. But my metric pretty heavily weighs strength of record, in which they are 68th in the country, and that's kind of what's keeping them out of the field. But they're really good. And then they were number 4 preseason in the country, so there's a reason why.
I mean, their losses are to Arizona, who we've already talked about is good. Nebraska, who we've already talked about, is playing above where they should be. Wisconsin, who we've already talked about, is playing amazing. So that's 3 of their 5 losses, and the other 2 are to James Madison to start the year when they weren't really ready to play yet. So that one's kind of negated a little bit. And to Duke, who was playing much better at the beginning of the year than they are now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Michigan State not making it. It's just at this point, with the start that they had, they just happen to be on the other outside looking in.
Correct. They shot themselves in the foot early, but they're playing.
They're going to play their way.
They're playing as if they were a top 5 preseason team currently.
Okay, number 8, Indiana. The metrics just hate Indiana. Number 111 in the net and 93rd in Ken Palm. Their resume has them at number 61 in the country. Off the bubble now. They were on the bubble. I talked to someone on Twitter I was talking about Rutgers tournament chances. And someone said, I feel like Indiana's in the same spot. I said, I feel like Indiana has a better shot. Then they go out and lose by 15 to Nebraska. Now they're roughly in the same spot. So Indiana has some work to do. If there's a team from this bottom 7 that I think has the capabilities to turn it around, I would guess it would be Indiana.
Right, but this was kind of expected because they lost
TJD
the entire team last year.
Hood Schifino, Miller Kopp, Race Thompson.
I think they lost all their starting 5, right? Did they bring somebody back?
I mean, Xavier Johnson's back, and he started
He was kind of
until
hurt
he got
last year,
hurt.
right? So
Trey Galloway's back.
But other than that,
But
they're kind of
yeah,
restarting. So I think this is kind of expected. I mean, if they turn it around, they can make the bubble. But
yeah. I mean,
I
they
think this is
were
kind of to be expected for Indiana this year.
they were on the bubble. They took a bad loss, which bumped them off the bubble. A good win can just as easily bring them right back up to it.
Right. And they still have,
They have
18 games,
as
19
much
games, 17
talent.
games to play. So
They have as much talent as maybe anyone in the conference still. Mackenzie Mbako is a freshman, is good. Khalil Ware was a
he's good when he
top.
stays out of Taco Bell's.
Yeah, I feel like we need to stop going to that well too. Like that's the one thing we know about Mackenzie Mbako. Khalil Ware was a top 10 high school player 2 years ago. He's shown that he's pretty good. Malik Renault is a solid four-man for that team. The guard play is going to be rough, but Xavier Johnson coming back will hopefully alleviate some of that. And so I think that they'll be competing for a bubble spot. Um, the shocker on this list is Minnesota at 9, coming off a big win in Ann Arbor. But yeah, they're number 9. These teams beneath them are just struggling. But Minnesota is making a case to where, if I mean, they could end up as a bubble team as well, I guess.
If you look back to the same episode where I was talking about how Penn State would be the worst team in the league, I said don't be surprised if Minnesota finishes 10 or 11, and you've currently got them at 9. So
I know already.
I'm I don't think it's out of the question that Minnesota is clearly the best team that they've had in 5, 10
Not
years.
10. They were a 5 seed in 2017, but since then, actually, I know. Yeah, I don't know what they've done since then. I feel like they maybe made a tournament in 2019. Since then, since COVID, this has been their best non-conference at least. I'm happy for Big Johnson. I'm a fan of him. I thought he
I
was going to
believe in
be
him
on
as
the
a
hot
coach.
seat.
I mean, I think he does great stuff coaching wise. He just
I
doesn't have the
thought
talent to back it up on his end on the court.
I
He can
thought he
do
was
whatever
going to
he
be
wants
on
on
the
the
hot seat.
sidelines,
Yeah.
but on the court, he just doesn't have the guys to execute.
And I thought they lost talent coming like this year. The portal was a negative for them this year, but even still, they're massively overperforming. But are they really, or is this just what they are? Because I guess last year this would have gotten you 12th, but even still, or 13th even. Um, but yeah, no, I mean I'm a fan of Ben Johnson. I'm glad that this team is good. I want him to keep his job because I like what he's doing. It's just I didn't know if the talent would be there, and they're pretty good. So I'm
This is
happy
the
for
proof of
Minnesota.
concept. So hopefully he can get talent in based on this season. He can show them this is what I've done with nothing. If you come, we can be legit.
Nebraska and Minnesota are the two teams that I need to watch super closely the next couple weeks because I'm just itching to write about them. Like I want to. I haven't watched them closely enough in the non-conference to where I feel like I can go in depth on them. But those are the teams I really want to write about. Rutgers is number 10. Um, the most recent Rutgers result was a 4-point loss on the road at Ohio State, which is kind of a moral victory, I feel like, because they were coming off before that, like a wire to wire, like super close game against 2-12 Stonehill. So that was a rough spot to be in. Um, I'm nervous for this Rutgers team. I don't think they have any juice at all.
No, I think I could see them slipping down to 12 in the conference. They just really don't have anything. Even at the rack, they've looked bland at best.
Yeah.
And that's usually where their bread and butter is. They play average on the road and win at home, and that's how they can kind of keep their resume up for the conference tournament and for the NCAA tournament. And they've looked not good on the road and average at home. So they've kind of slipped in both categories, which isn't very good for them.
I've been worried about offense with Rutgers without losing Mulcahy and Cam Spencer to the portal, losing Caleb McConnell, who wasn't huge offensively, but they just haven't really replaced those guys at all offensively, and that's just been a huge problem. Moving forward, Iowa at number 11. Iowa's another team I think can turn it around, but I think it would be the easiest for them to do it, but I don't see it happening personally.
I think the problem with Iowa is that they don't have any real option that they can turn to.
Peyton
It's like,
Sanford is all right, but like he's not Keegan or Chris Murray. He's not a Luka Garza, which they've had these Big Ten Player of the Year type of guys recently, and they just Peyton Sanford might be a third team or honorable mention type guy, and that's their guy.
and that's the guy, and they don't
Him
really
and
have. And when he's not darting it for 40% on a night,
Ben Krikke is
it's
scoring well, but
but he gets
you
in
know
foul trouble too much. That he's too slow to guard really anybody, so he gets in foul trouble. They got to sit him. They don't really have a guy that they can turn to after that. And then so when you only have to game plan for one guy, and his specialty is just shooting the three, which I get. I mean, Tominaga just did it what was that, 2 nights ago now? Last night, maybe, and against Indiana. I mean, that's his one game plan is that he just runs around and he either will back cut you if you stop looking at him, or he'll just shoot the ball over your face. Um, but they have other pieces around him that they can't really all focus on him and stop him. Iowa doesn't have that, and so they run into problems where they just can't run an offense, and they don't have the defense that's good enough to uphold that kind of offense that they have.
I think with all these teams outside of Minnesota, last year they've all decreased. The rest of the teams on the list and the team Indiana, Minnesota, Rutgers, Iowa, and then the other three, they've all decreased. They've taken a step back from last year to this year. Iowa, I think it would be the easiest for them of anyone to get back to the level that they were at last year. I don't know if it will happen, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Iowa. And just because I mean, if they make shots, they're the quintessential make shots team. And so if they make shots, who knows? I've got Michigan at 12. The loss against Minnesota did not change their spot on the list, actually, but I kind of had them in a tier with Rutgers and Iowa. And now I think they've just moved down to the tier with Maryland. And so them and Maryland are kind of neck and neck, I think, but I still think Michigan deserves to be a little farther ahead. 62nd in Ken Palm, 84th in the net. The season isn't over. You have 17, 18 Big Ten games left. Like, you can make something out of the rest of the schedule. I'm curious to see if you will, because that's the thing with the Juwan Howard era. These last two seasons, the records have not been pretty, but in Big Ten play, it's 11-9 every year. So
Yeah, it's 100% doable to get back into a conversation. But it just means they actually have to implement changes in a way that makes them play better. And I haven't seen that yet this season, and not much last year either. So I'm
it
not getting my hopes up for this team.
it feels different because last year you had all the talent, the first round talent in guys like Jet Howard and Kobe Buffkin, and obviously Hunter Dickinson was a first team All Big Ten guy. In the past, I don't think it was last year, but this year Doug McDaniel's good, right, and Cromwell's good, but this team doesn't have any depth at all, and
Correct.
also the starters are maybe equally as talented as last year, but probably less so, and so whenever you've already dug yourself this hole in the non-conference, it just appears it's just in a worse state than it was last year.
They need to go, 12-8 at the absolute worst to have a chance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Anything
Okay,
anything less than 12 wins is
it's not going to get it
there's
done.
not even a chance at conversation. At 12 wins, you have a chance to be in conversation.
Yeah,
You probably need 15-5 to make you certain that you could make the tournament.
yeah, and that's
It's
what
not
Purdue
gonna
went
happen.
last year. Yeah, so 13 is Maryland. I'm still just shocked at the Maryland um, product, just in general. Um, this team, another team with just like no depth. They just don't make shots.
When I
It's
tried to tell you that they had no offense and you didn't believe me, I thought you were smoking crack, but I mean, I think I've been
it's
semi
not
vindicated in the
it's not
fact
that I
that they
yeah,
can't score.
it's not that I didn't believe you. It was I thought you were exaggerating. And I watched them play Purdue at home and score 53 points. I was like, yeah, he wasn't exaggerating at all. They just cannot score.
They
And
just have no option
at
whatsoever.
at home, you think last year they were a different team. Even this, like they hadn't lost at home yet. Um, Outside of Jameer Young, like Zach Edey took Julian Reese completely out of the game. He didn't score once. Um, and so whenever you don't have a third guy and your second guy is being held scoreless, it's a tough look. And then Penn State's last. Like I said, I'm disappointed in Penn State, although they're still fun. I think they're more fun than they're more fun than Rutgers. They're more fun than Maryland, but they're just worse. Kanye Clary's good offensively. Ace Baldwin is good.
Yeah, I think this was just kind of to be expected, at least for me. I knew that they weren't, they just lost. Losing your entire offense and coaching staff in one season is just too much to overcome. You can have an okay season if you lose one or the other, but both is impossible.
I'm chalking up the Penn State numbers to first year Big Ten coach because I feel like that's a hard role to step into whenever you have a middle of the pack or below program in the Big Ten. You step in with your new crew, especially coming from a mid major. There's going to be a learning curve, and by year three, I think Mike Rhodes and Penn State will be, a bubble team. But it's just going to take some time. That's what happened with Illinois whenever Brad took over. Coming in from Stephen F. Austin, he had the year at Oklahoma State, but yeah, it's gonna take some time. There's gonna be a learning curve, and so I'm excited for the Penn State program, but I just don't see anything happening next year, even. So those are my tournament rankings. Again, we'll probably fly through those in the future. Just kind of want to get our thoughts off about each and every team that we didn't talk about previously. Let's go quickly through this weekend schedule, and then we will be done. Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern, on Big Ten Network. Rutgers goes to Carver Hawkeye to take on Iowa. The loser of this game is going to dig themselves a very deep hole in Big Ten play. Rutgers 0-2, Iowa 0-3, the only two winless teams in the conference. What are you looking for? What do you like in this game?
Well, I would say I'm looking for, I mean, for both teams, I would say I'm looking for them to show that they have any sort of life left. Do they have any pulse in the conference, or are they just giving up on the entire year? I think if it's kind of a blowout on either side, I think whatever team is on the losing side is essentially done. They should just, mail it in,
Pack it in.
throw in the towel, whatever, metaphor you want to use there. Um, and even if it's close, I don't really, maybe that means that both teams are going to suck. I don't know. You just have to wait and see. But I really just, I don't want to put my two eyes on a TV that has this game on it.
Iowa at home should be the pick, I feel like, just because of the shooting bonus. Rutgers, the rack doesn't travel. I don't know what the line will be. I think Rutgers is probably the better team, even, but Iowa is the pick, I think. And you were talking about packing it in for next year. At least Rutgers has something to look for with Ace Bailey, with Dylan Harper. Like they have a great recruiting class coming up. That will be very scary. Iowa, they need to keep winning to have any sort of hope for anything. So I think Iowa's probably the pick there. I'm gonna say game of the weekend. I mean, I guess if you're not counting Friday night, game of the weekend, 1:15 on Big Ten Network, 1:15 Central, 2:15 Eastern. Nebraska travels to Madison, Wisconsin to take on the Badgers, number 21 in the country. What do you think about Nebraska's chances to go into Kohl Arena and beat the Badgers?
I think the chances are real. I would put it at a solid toss up 50-50 game.
50-50, I think that's kind of wild. I think
I'm a believer in the Huskers.
I think they go into Cole and they win 3 times out of 10. That's kind of the number that I would throw out there because I do believe in this Wisconsin team. I believe in Nebraska too, and I'm curious to see. Just, I mean, Nebraska has so many guys that can do it, but then again, can they guard this Wisconsin team? I think that this will be, again, there are a few teams that we are going to figure out where they stand this weekend, because Purdue, Illinois will be that game. This will be that game as well. How good is Wisconsin really? How good is Nebraska really? But if the line comes out as something, 5.5 or more, I like Nebraska in that for sure. Okay, and then the nightcap on Fox at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on Saturday night. The Buckeyes travel to Simon Scott Assembly Hall to take on the Indiana Hoosiers. Another what should be really good game. How good are you really? If I had to guess, this game should be about a toss-up. Indiana may have a slight favorite, maybe a slight favorite, but I think I would take Ohio State to cover that. What are you looking for in this one?
I'm going to be in the same boat you are and say it's probably closer than maybe it should be, but I like Ohio State to maybe win.
I think I like Ohio State to win regardless. I think that, regardless of what the line is, I like Ohio State outright. I just think they're better than Indiana. It may be different because of my thoughts after watching the Nebraska game, but I feel like there is a relatively large gap between the top half of the conference and the bottom half. And Ohio State's in the top half and Indiana's in the bottom half right now. I'm curious about the guard matchup too, because Indiana getting Xavier Johnson back, Trey Galloway, Gabe Cupps, all three of those guys can guard. I'm curious to see what Thornton and Gale do against that backcourt. That's the matchup to watch in that one. All right, and then Sunday's games, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern on BTN, the most important game of the weekend for Michigan fans as they travel to Penn State in Happy Valley and take on the Nittany Lions. What do you think? You think you're beating Penn State?
Well,
You're not going to watch. You're not going to watch.
I won't be able to because I will be driving to my flight to Houston. So,
Okay.
will not be watching any of the games on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, sadly. But in the Palestra, it's Phil Martelli's home,
Oh, I didn't know
and
it
it's
was a
the
Palestra game.
worst team in the league. Give me the Wolverines.
Okay. I think I would probably also pick Michigan, but I don't know why. This is a game that I'm just not even remotely interested anymore. So yeah, but probably the most important game for Michigan people this week.
If they lose this game, the season is over. There is
Yes.
no recovery.
Yeah.
If they lose this game, the season's over.
Yep. Maryland at Minnesota in a game that you would have thought would have been about a toss-up. Minnesota is going to be favored in this game at home against Maryland at 4:30. I don't know. It doesn't say where it's going to be. We don't have a TV network yet, but maybe it's not going to be on TV, and maybe that's for the best. But
I don't know. I think Minnesota plays pretty well, and they win this game by 8 or 9.
if Minnesota jumps out to a 3-1 record in conference, the world's going to be on fire. That's something that I was not prepared for.
Come Sunday at 7 p.m., they're going to be 3-1 in conference.
I'm bookmarking that just in case if it doesn't happen. But yeah, no, they're the better team and they're at home. They should take care of business, and there are going to be more and more games now where you're going to be able to say that about Minnesota. Whereas the past 2 years, it's just been house money anytime they can win. Last game of the weekend, the bubble game, Northwestern hosting Michigan State at 6:30 on Sunday night, 7:30 Eastern. Michigan State's got to win this game, right?
I think this might be the easiest pick of any of the weekend games, and that's Michigan State by whatever the points are.
Okay. They're in Evanston.
As long as the points are like 15 or less, you take Michigan State with the points. I have to imagine.
Okay, I'm fine with taking Michigan State in that game as well. Um, yeah, quickly, Purdue tonight against Illinois is minus 10.5.
11 points is a lot to beat somebody by a
Especially a
lot to
team
beat a
that's
good team by.
being considered the second best team in your conference. I get no Terrence Shannon in Mackey Arena, but the students aren't there. I
I'll
like Illinois
take
to cover.
I'll take Purdue money line, but I like
Yeah,
Illinois to cover
I
the
can
points.
agree with that. I'll take that. Okay. That'll wrap it up. Pretty long episode. We did essentially have a month's worth of Big Ten stuff to talk about, I feel like. So I'm glad we're gonna be back to doing weekly stuff, weekly episodes for the rest of Big Ten play. So I'm excited for that. Once again, check us out. Twitter, TikTok, links are in the description. Also, the new website. Read all the articles; they're all still pertinent. Check all those out. I think we'll probably be figuring out a way to upload my brackets into the website at some point in the near future, hopefully. I'm excited for that. Um, Give us a like and a subscribe wherever you're watching this. Thank you guys for listening. You got anything before we end it, Taylor?
No, I don't think so. The Big Ten sucks, so get ready for a long and brutal winter, except for the top 5 teams.
Yeah, no. That's as good a way to end it as any. Thank you guys again for listening, and we will see you at this time next week.